So you may be bothered by your hate, but you may also still be resistant to fully accepting that your experience is only coming from you. There may be a part of your mind, possibly even a big part of your mind, that still wants to believe the other person or the outer circumstances to blame. If that's true, you aren't fully ready yet. What Spirit is saying is, do not judge yourself for not being fully ready. Why? Well, to judge yourself for not being fully ready is a perception that you have chosen. It's an ego perception. And an ego perception is going to lead to more ego code. To say, I'm not ready. I can feel this. I'm not ready to say that this is all me. I'm not ready. And to say that without any judgment at all is a different chosen perception. And it's actually going to lead to a different experience for you, and it's going to lead to a different vibration of code. You know, one thing that I have learned is that judgment is never helpful. Accepting what is, no matter how, quote, bad or difficult it seems, is always a better choice. Accepting your current state of mind, no matter how screwed up you perceive yourself to be, is better than judging yourself for your current state of mind. Rest, relax, and be patient. That is Holy Spirit's guidance. Rest, relax, and be patient. And you know what? Choosing that perception is going to help you to be ready faster than choosing to judge yourself for not being ready. You're actually taking more responsibility than you think you are if you're able to say to yourself, I'm just not ready to accept that yet. Because you know what? You're admitting that there's something there to accept. You're more ready than you think you are. So don't judge yourself. If you're listening to this, if you're considering this as a possibility at all, you're probably more ready than you judge yourself to be. So rest, relax, and be patient. Let this teaching marinate in the back of your mind. The time will come when you will say, I want to be free. And what you mean by that is, I'm willing to do this work and not blame anyone or anything for my experience. And again, Spirit says, accepting this responsibility is key. So no matter how long the time, no matter how long it takes, the time is very well spent. Waiting for your readiness, instead of judging yourself, is time well spent. And in fact, I'm waiting now for my next readiness. Not even certain I know exactly what it is, but I know that I'm waiting. I can feel that I'm waiting. My guidance for the last several weeks has been wait for it. Wait for it. So I'm waiting. Waiting for your readiness is actually time well spent. All right, next paragraph. Accepting responsibility for the code and accepting or allowing your reaction to it is different than re-accepting the code into the mind. Okay, this is very, very, very important. It's really what I'm just talking about, but worth repeating. You know, if I grab that bottle of water and throw it on the ground in a moment of anger, right? Accepting my reaction. Accepting that my reaction came from the fact that I sat and thought these thoughts for the last week is completely different than believing the code and continuing to think that Laurent is guilty and he shouldn't buy expensive water. It's a completely different reaction, and therefore it's going to lead to a completely different future effect, a different set of possibilities, a different layer within the code. It doesn't matter how, quote, bad my automatic reaction was. It doesn't matter how mean or vicious I appeared to be in that moment. Acceptance of that, and acceptance of my responsibility in that, is always the most helpful choice. Accepting responsibility for the code and accepting or allowing your reaction to it is different than re-accepting the code into the mind. When you step into your power as creator and choose to accept responsibility, including choosing to accept the effects of the code as you previously interpreted it, you are also choosing not to re-accept the code. Right? Because if I'm saying, I know where this anger came from, it came from me listening to these thoughts for the last week, that's completely different than saying, I know where this anger came from, it's Laurent. Right? It's a completely different perspective. It's a completely different perspective. And therefore it's going to lead to a completely different result. When you step into your power as creator and choose to accept responsibility, including choosing to accept the effects of the code as you previously interpret it, you are also choosing not to re-accept the code. If you were re-accepting the same code into the mind, you would not be pausing to see that this line of code need not be. You would not recognize your power. You would not be aware that there is another way to see. So whenever you pause to look at the code, you are changing the code by shifting to another vibrational level. Whenever you pause to look at it, you're changing it. Whenever you pause to look at it, you're doing something different than you would have done if you'd just gone right on with your, fear story, or right on with your anger story, or right on with your hate story. You know what this reminds me of is the movie Next. Have you seen the movie Next? If not, you might want to watch it, because both one of the opening lines and the closing line is actually this same teaching. The line is, if you look at the future, you change it. If you look at it, you change it. Well, in this way, we're saying if you look at the current moment, if you look at the code, you change it. Looking at it is different than believing it and acting it out and fully experiencing it. Looking at it is different. Looking at it is moving you towards healing. It's going to shift you to another vibrational level. Now, Spirit says, it is true that this is not a true edit of the code. The symbol of editing is useful, but at the level of individual, that power does not exist. Again, I'm not trying to change Laurent. I'm not trying to say, okay, if I accept this, he will stop buying the water, right? And we fall into that trap. I laugh, but you guys know as well as I do, if I accept that I don't have money, then I will get money. If I accept my illness, it will go away. Right? We have those thoughts. Now, the truth is sometimes that happens, but sometimes that doesn't. The individual alone is not where the code is coming from. The code is coming from a totality. So when the individual changes their perception, the code is going to change somehow. But specifically how cannot be determined. So I'm not trying to change my mind so that I can change Laurent. I'm not trying to change my mind so that the disease will go away. I'm not trying to change my mind so the money will start pouring in. I have no idea how the overall code will be affected when I change my mind. I only know that it will. Taking my ego out of it is always going to be helpful. Exactly how it's helpful, well, that remains to be seen. But I'm not looking for a specific change in form. I'm only looking for the peace of God, to know thyself, to be only love, to have a happy experience, to be joy, to be free. That can be my only motive. So it is true that it is not a true edit of the code. The symbol of editing is useful, but at that level, the individual. Let me start that over. I stuttered majorly here. It is true that this is not a true edit of the code. The symbol of editing is useful, but at the level of individual, that power does not exist. Remember, the total layered code comes from the totality. So by choosing another way to see, you are choosing to shift vibrationally to another layer of the same basic code. Every option is already written, but the option you choose affects the overall writing of every layer of code. Experience is different than reality, and to try to reconcile the two through intellect is an impossibility. But reality and its effect on experience is understood through non-intellect. It cannot be put into words, but it can be seen, and it can be seen clearly. Still, when it is seen from a perspective that isn't totality, since the individual interpretation always applies. Individual interpretation is your freedom, and your freedom combined with the totality of all creates the unlimited potential that is God. So what this last paragraph is basically saying is, do not try to understand this message intellectually. Do not try to figure out with the mind, the thinking mind, how changing your perception is going to change the code. What the effects will be. If 2 or 3 people think this way, what's the difference between if I can get 100 people to think this way? That's not your purpose. And in fact, Jesus is very clear about that in A Course in Miracles when he asks us not to consciously choose miracles, right? When he asks us to be miracle ready, but not to consciously choose them. Different words, but the same thing here. Our only responsibility is to choose our perception, our current perception of the code. Our responsibility is to practice discernment in our mind. Is this thought in alignment with my purpose? If not, I let it go. If it is, I keep it. That's all I do. The effect of that, the results of that, are not my business, nor are they for me to try to figure out, or to try to predict, or to try to control. It's not up to me to look at a situation and to decide that situation needs to change, and the way I'll change it is with my mind. My purpose is simply to watch my mind and to always choose the highest perception that is offered to me in the moment. Through that, things will change. That's it. Now, I only have 1 minute left, so in 1 minute what I will tell you is 2 things happened in my relationship with Laurent as I continued to practice the code. 1, my experience of hate became weaker and weaker. The thoughts became easier and easier to not accept, right? It became weaker and weaker. In some things, like over time, in some things, he did change. And in others, he didn't. And in the end, it didn't matter at all, because I just loved him fully exactly as he was, as he is. I became free of my need for him to be different. That's what this is all about. Okay, that's it for me. I love you all, and I will see you next week. Bye.